Hey guys, so today I want to talk about something that, especially if you're in Beijing, I don't think you need me to tell you about, and that is the smog. So what is smog and where did it come from in the first place? Well, the word smog was actually first seen in 1905. A guy called Henri-Antoine Devaux, who wrote in his paper about the mixture of smoke and fog that he named smog, and was first seen in Mexico and also, of course, in London at the time. So that became known famously as the London smog, and was used to describe the artificial fog that came from there. So we know that smog is nothing new, but what is new in the Beijing and Chinese smog is the levels of smog that we're seeing because of the levels of technology that we have now in comparison to the 1900s, but also our levels of consciousness. Of course, in the 1900s, no one was really aware that it was detrimental to health. So Devaux isn't wrong in stating that anyone who's there at the time could see perfectly well the problems that the pollution is causing without any kind of scientific instruments or anything like that, or not see, as the case may be, given that you could hardly see the building right next to you. This is not just going on in Beijing, this is going on in all of northeast China, and the problems that have come from the pollution are also affecting large parts of China, causing problems like flooding, desertification, loss of grassland, which are important for a lot of agricultural ways of life and things like that. The level of the pollution was 35 times the World Health Organization's recommended safety allowance, so that is well over, of course, and so the Beijing government put the warning onto an orange level, which is just underneath the worst level, that is a red level. Something called PM 2.5, which are little things called microns, which are very detrimental to health if they go into your lungs and things like that. They were at a level of 900, and the WHO recommends that that be just 25. So why was there suddenly so much smog this weekend? Well, the coal-fired power stations were being used a lot, especially this weekend, because of the lowering temperatures, meaning that coal was having to be used to heat homes, and the usual use of cars and heavy goods vehicles and things like that. Also not helped by the high humidity levels and the lack of wind, which was what finally saved Beijing on Monday. So what is being done about this problem? Well, the government has taken tests on all of the cities in China and found that only 8 of those cities within China have passed the government's safety test. So the government seems to be quite concerned as well. Just yesterday, the Premier Li Keqiang took a meeting on this issue. So the conclusion was to reduce emissions, and they decided to put a control on coal power stations of less than 310 grams per kilowatt hour. So what's China doing to make its contribution to the climate better amongst the world stage? Well, back in 2009, China really wasn't making much of an effort to stop its pollution. As then and now, it was the #1 polluter in the world. However, things have started to change, as back then China was just saying that it needed all of that electricity in order to take people out of poverty, which is a similar position to that of India, who at the recent Paris conference said exactly the same thing. However, India's pollution is a quarter that of China's, when China is not that much bigger by population from India. However, recently at the Paris conference and things like that, China has started to change its tone. It started to become much more pro-climate and pro-environmentalist, with things like promising to reduce fossil fuel emissions to 60 to 65% by 2030. But what India and China, I think, do agree on is that perhaps the Western countries and the more developed countries have already given their contribution to the world pollution, and so more developing countries like India and China and many others should be given their own chance and their own time to develop and try and alleviate poverty before they should have more controls put on them. So could China's environmental future be a positive one? Well, actually, the Chinese government has cleverly seen a couple of opportunities in the future, and there are actually three, because as you know, China is looking for a place on the world stage. It's also looking to increase its own home environment, as it's been pretty clear that it's been causing problems with, as I've said, flooding and deforestation and desertification and things like that. It's also needs a more sustainable economy. So there's actually one way to solve all of these for China, and that is to invest in green energy. That introduces it into things like the Paris talks and things like that, in which states from all over the world talk about these issues. It also means that China is going to begin to solve these problems of the environment around the world and in China as the world's largest producer of pollution. And finally, it makes for a much more sustainable method of growth for China. It's also going to be a real benefit for the world, in that China is going to be able to produce masses of green energy and green technology for the world that will be increasingly cheap, and of course really reduce the world's pollution levels. So I think in the future, as long as the Chinese government follow on their promises, I think the future could be really, really positive for everyone.